Hello and welcome to Focus on Parliament on Civic Space TV, brought to you by the Center for Constitutional Governance. I am Kwagala, your host. This week, in what has been a whirlwind of political activity, the Parliament controversially passed the UPDF Amendment Bill, effectively restoring jurisdiction for the military courts to once again try civilians. On today's edition of Focus on Parliament, we explore the hits and the misses of this contentious piece of legislation. Joining me to dissect this topic is a panel of distinguished personalities whom I now have the honor and the pleasure to introduce to you, our esteemed viewers. Let me start from my immediate left. Is Professor Mwambutsya Ndebesa, a renowned historian and an eminent political commentator. Professor, it's a pleasure to have you today. Say hello to the viewers.
Good morning to you, morning to the viewers out there and listeners. Glad to be here once again to have some deliberations on important issues that affect the nation in this space, which is a free space. It's not a controlled space, and it is not an invited space. It is a free space to express the views that we expect to have an impact, and the positive one at that, to contribute to nation building.
Many thanks indeed, Professor, for joining us this morning. This morning we are also joined by Dr. Tolit Atiya, who is a specialist in the sphere of governance and also the Associate Director at the Center for Constitutional Governance. Doctor, it's a pleasure to have you once again. How are you doing today?
Yeah, thank you. I'm very well. After not being here for a couple of times, but we keep managing around the usual global and world challenges. Of course, it is definitely a very sad day for anybody who is really concerned about free will, free living, and particularly for Uganda, given where we came from, to find ourselves right here again. It is almost like the wheels that started running have just eventually stopped. Yes.
Thank you, Doctor, for joining us. Let me engage you first again, Dr. Tolit. This bill represents a slap in the face of the ethos of constitutionalism, good governance, and the rule of law in the country. What are your immediate reflections of this?
How well, for me, one, it's an opportunity lost. I took a little time just to reflect on the growth and the dynamics within the African Union, which we know that replaced the OAU. And when you look at the authoring document or the legislative document, so to speak, of the African Union, at its fulcrum is basically the notion of democracy, governance, and human rights. And there is evidence that there has been frantic effort on both the part of the AU Commission and the member states to try and augment this commitment, both in terms of the summits of the presidents, and the infrastructure they have put. Two of them caught my eyes. One is that there was an exercise by the peer, the Africa peer group or mechanism, the Africa peer mechanism or group, if you like. They did a study or a survey across the African countries. And in 2017, they came up with a document that prioritized the issues and also set out some kind of layout that could then allow the AU sort of crystallize the whole issue of, or the notion of democracy, good governance, and human rights. And all this, of course, is tied around two ideas. One, that Africa is playing a catch-up game to the rest of the world and its attempt to be accepted as global citizens. The other is, of course, the big question of the African poverty and how you move African citizens, and particularly the sub-Saharan citizens, from this glaring face of poverty, and then also running away from the trapments of continued instability, insecurity, wars that have caused refugees, that have displaced children out of school, and you know, that entire bleak picture of Africa that we've always talked about. Now, what for me then is starkly contrasting is how, on one hand, there is this Pan-African effort with huge resources. There is a huge support of the European Union that has gone into these works. We now have things like NEPAD, we have the Africa governance architecture. You know, all these are mechanisms to try and make sure that this notion is realized. That is on one hand. On the other hand, and coming back right home, you have the same tenets that are being advocated for, that are being pushed to realization, coming under direct attack. And yet from people who seem to be what you'd, I don't know what the English word is, the Africans, I think the direct translation is people who are cross-mouthed. You are preaching one thing, but you are doing the other. So the events in Parliament send me asking myself, does this government really care? Does it have a sense of shame? Is it organized in a manner that it has respect for peers? Because the events in Parliament were really, really disturbing. I just want to take one element of it, which is a governance aspect, the question of process. Because for me, it's not even so much the laws. The effort, the issue of whether you amend some, you know, those sections, the proposed sections or not, is really not a big thing anymore. This is actually not a legal exercise. This is really a governance issue. And the whole the whole challenge around it is how governance processes are flouted by the institutions that should actually be that actually are well situated to ensure that some elements of governance or the decorum in governance is actually observed. For instance, we know that government or the state will always propose policies or laws or whichever form of legislation to be able to manage its business. And that is usual business. But we expect that once these prepositions come forth, and since we are living within this representative kind of democracy where we have members of parliament elected, to be able then to deliberate on behalf of the rest of the country, then we expect that some rigorousness is expected. There are some standards. A law, yes, parliament passes laws, but there is an element of universality. There are some requisite standards that a bill should go through for it to pass the test to be recognized as a good or fair piece of legislation. Now, this particular bill, although I'm very reluctant to go into the aspects inside the bill, because that will dissuade me from the issue of process. But you'll see that this bill, the sponsors were quite tactical. One thing they did is that it is voluminous. We know that almost 80 sections were proposed for amendment. Now, anybody with a fair understanding of legal drafting, even just 1, 2, 3 sections takes a bit of a toll, even for legal drafters who are probably naturally lawyers. But now you are having these 80 sections brought to a committee of parliament who, in terms of expertise, maybe probably amongst them, I don't think there are even more than 10 lawyers. So you can clearly see that there's an ulterior motive. The motive was defeatist. That is one. Then two, the happenings around it, the speed at which it was being pushed. There is one element in legislation, especially in the style of representative democracy, and that is the question of engaging stakeholders. In this case, at least going by the media, an institution like the Uganda Law Society, which is really more or less, the card drum of legal opinion in the country. One of their objects is actually to give legal counsel, constitutional advice, and all that to the nation. They said they were invited in a space of 1 hour, 1.5 hours. Who does that? And even if they were lawyers, even you as a lawyer, they've always argued the best of lawyers are not actually probably the people who have crammed the laws, but the people who know the sources of law, where to go and get it. So in 1 hour, how do you deal with a bill proposing 80 sections? They extended similar kind of invite to other key stakeholders. So it is clear that there is a running veneer of an ulterior motive in this whole process.
Doctor, before I engage Professor, speaking of adhering to the very high standards, that govern legislative processes globally, which we have flouted as a country in the process of enacting the UPDF Amendment Act. Do you feel that the opposition was justified to boycott the debate in the plenary regarding that specific piece of legislation?
Well, for me, I really don't think it is of serious consequence how the opposition conducts itself when they come into issues that are dividing. Because you see, the business of parliament is designed in a manner that there will always be opposite sides. And the notion is that you try to win the other side. And oftentimes win the other side by making convincing arguments. But you see, we have a parliament. We don't have a natural parliament. We have a parliament that is really, really unorthodox in many ways. One is, first of all, that by virtue of numbers, we have had a situation where you have had bills passed by the sheer notion of tyranny of numbers. That is one character of the parliament that we have. The other is that we have a parliament that does not have any serious billing, or recognition when it comes to actually debate issues. And this stems right from the way the Speaker of the Parliament runs the Parliament. This Parliament is very, very clearly skewed towards the ruling government. So, for me, whether the opposition stayed in the House, they weren't going to have a chance, to have any convincing debate. Even the rest of the members of Parliament who are movement, members or inclined members, they are not keen to debate these issues. Bills have, there is hardly any evidence to show that bills have come and have been passed on its merits or demerits. It is clear from one report, we've had accusations of where parliamentarians have got money before the bills have been passed. We've had situations where the movement caucus has been called and flogged towards a certain thinking. And even when you listen to the members of parliament, as in this debate, I didn't listen, that particular day, I didn't listen to much of the arguments, but I've listened to debates just slightly before this bill was passed. You can clearly see that there doesn't seem to be any independent running ideas. Apparently, by the many of the members of parliament, I don't think even had a chance to read that bill, The notion, the argument that the president has made before, and which basically is a bogus argument around securitarization of issues. And, every time you see a government, because government has all the will and might to find a way to protect the country, and which is a cardinal demand on a sitting government. So for you to begin to run behind a single piece of legislation and say, this is the thing that is going to protect the country, this is the thing that is going to give us sovereignty, I think is in my view, a bogus argument.
Thank you, Doctor, for your reflections. Professor, this bill has been passed hurriedly by Parliament. It is now awaiting presidential assent. What do you think will be the implications of its enforcement on the Ugandan citizen?
Thank you, but maybe before we look at its implications, let's first also let me make a rejoinder on the challenge of this legislation. The scholar here knows there is a certain scholar called a French philosopher scholar, Michel Foucault.
Yeah, Foucault.
And he gives us a framework of understanding some of these governance issues, because Dr. Tolit has already pointed to you that this is, I agree with him, that this is not a legal matter, but this is a governance question. He calls his, that framework is called governmentality. In that, Michel Foucault meant that you have a mentality of government, and then that mentality is the one which informs the governance, governmentality. So to understand the processing of this bill and its aim or the spirit behind this law, you can use that framework of governmentality, mentality of government, and then the governance. So the NRA mentality, one, we want to go into the mentality because it is a mentality that decides or informs behavior and actions. So the mentality generally is that of entitlement. It is an entitlement mentality. Some scholars have called it liberation curse. You can observe it all the way from Mozambique through Zimbabwe to Rwanda, Uganda, Sudan, and Ethiopia. Those who liberated have the mentality of entitlement. We are entitled to rule because we liberated. And anybody else who wants to come and join us in this governance and hold dissenting views and alternative organizing is, in the language of NRA in Kiswahili, is a kipingamizi, is standing on our way to govern, and yet we are entitled. So he must be got rid of. And in that framework of Foucault is that the government designs certain techniques. For him, he calls them technologies. Techniques to govern, and at all costs. So you have a government which thinks is entitled to govern, and anybody else is just disturbing. In fact, this whole notion of multi-party parliament or whatever to the NRM is just something that you can use hypocritically to justify and legitimize your government, that it is democratic, because otherwise the whole world can shout against you, because the mentality can be read in a public discourse, or the discourses of, for example, President Museveni, when after the referendum in 2005, or thereabout,
Yeah.
he did say in his speech after the referendum, he said that the movement is superior to multi-party system. All we want now is Kubejako, get rid of you, so that you don't contaminate us inside. So that is the mentality. You read it in mentalities like the late, my friend Kajabago Karsoke, the instructor in Chankwanzi ideological school. One time he wrote in the papers openly, and the papers even published it that way, and it has never been refuted. He said that There are some people, and then there are biological substances. That some are people, others are biological substances. So, these biological substances, the opposition, are disturbing the entitlement, and they have to be got rid of using certain technologies or techniques. And so, the bill was about those techniques. It is techniques now, and you can see, I watched the first bit of the debate. By the way, later on they removed it. They removed it from the public view. Everybody who was standing, they had to speak from the NRM to speak to the bill. The first three, I think it was the Prime Minister, and then the legal committee chairman,
Parliamentary Affairs Committee.
Parliamentary Affairs Committee, and I think the Minister
For Defense,
yes,
or the Attorney General.
and the Attorney General. They were all saying they were efficient. We are talking about now the procedure justice. That we were efficient. The Parliament talks about 45 days in which to process a bill. But for us, since we did it in one day, therefore we are efficient. And I agree with them. Efficiency in what? In manipulation. They were efficient in manipulation. That is efficiency. The efficiency was not about dialogue and deliberations so that we have a bill passed on the force of reason, but just manipulating in order to get rid of Kubejako. So, it is that mentality that informs the governance. And so it's not a surprise. I don't know why we are even taking time to debate the cons and pros of the legalities of the bill. This bill was passed in the State House. This bill was the committee, the Legal and Parliamentary Affairs Committee, and the Parliamentary Committee was in a hotel, we are told, writing the report. They were called in the State House. And the chairman had promised that they would come back and finish composing
The report.
the report. But after Entebbe, they never went back to the hotel. They were instructed what to pass. And the chief whip, at that night, he said, we have resolved that the bill in its form, both bills, by the way, they were two, in their current form, should be passed or must be passed. So all was needed was a technique to bring everybody to come and vote for it. I saw even Moses Ali in his form. I saw Kahindo Tafire also reading Monitor. They were not bothered about what people were talking about. They had come to pass the bill. You asked a question to my colleague here whether boycott was right or wrong. Boycotting what now? The deal was finished to pass the bill. There are those whom I have heard saying that you see, at least the members of opposition would have come back to be on record. They were on record. By going out, that is a record. Boycotting is a record, isn't it?
But they also published a report dissenting from the position of the majority.
Yes, but,
NRM.
But to me, even the action of boycotting is more significant than remaining and talking. Wacha waseme watachoka. Let them talk, they will get tired. Getting out. Let me give you an illustration using history now. In 2001, I think, there was a referendum. Was it 2001?
No.
There was a referendum on opening for multi-party. And the opposition... No, 2001.
2001.
2001. You were young, you were not following. In 2001, there was a referendum. And the opposition boycotted. And the people were saying, why boycott? Why not participate? Why participate to be participating? So they boycotted and they were dismissed. In 2001, only Ochegere participated. He was participated, but then he was not participated. Maybe he ended up getting an ambassadorial post. I'm told he has been recalled. But that's a different matter. So, but 4 years later, there was a referendum in 2005, the one we are talking about. Now, the people who were for movement to continue in 2005 were the ones saying, let the movement end. In other words, the boycott worked. It worked to a certain extent that the government or the NRM accepted that, one, there is a bad image internationally. And you know, when you are governing, you would want also to get legitimacy even outside and inside. Outside and inside. So, because it was boycotted, the message sank. And then, this time, it also appeared to them that when you continue with the movement system, there will be pretenders inside. Not pretenders actually, there will be people who are themselves, but they have nothing to do. They will be inside and they will disturb you. So you get rid of them and you continue with what you think is the correct thing. So that is the mentality, governmentality. That's the mentality behind the spirit of the law. Significance now, which you asked. The significance to me is negative, is that you are polarizing the country. For me, I am more interested in nation building than even in democracy, although I'm interested in democracy also. You are polarizing society, and you have that mentality that for us we are entitled and we can do anything because, in the words of Honorable Anite, Tulina Maje, but that's what Obote said also in 1981 when he was castigating Museveni. He said, first he was talking about Semogerere, and he did say, where are your generals? And later on he said, these Museveni, they can go to the bush, we shall find them there and leave them there, they are here. So we have to be very careful polarizing the country like this one. We are polarizing the country. We are trying to gag the dissenting spaces using these laws, the so-called legislation, which is actually facade. And you are happy to push Nup and Kyagulanyi into Buganda. You don't allow him to go beyond Buganda. Let him go and remain here in Buganda. We shall contain him and control him in Buganda. And then you say, let us contain Jimmy Akena in Lango. We don't allow him to go beyond Lango. There he can campaign. We contain him there. Now, you are ethnicizing the politics. You are not allowing these opposition parties also to have a presence elsewhere. I want to say we are riding on the back of a tiger. All of us, we are riding on the back of a tiger. We shall have the country disintegrate. Ethiopia had similar mentality and governmentality that the Tigrayans were entitled because we were leading the liberation. And when Zenawe unfortunately passed on, 30 years in power, he was replaced by Herenimana, who was not a Tigrayan, who was not an entitled person. I think it seems he had not even gone to the bush. The entitled people made it impossible for him to govern. See, where were you? You remember when Jim was told the Justice Ogora that where were you when we were in the bush? We are entitled, where were you? Similarly, the Tigrayans asked Harimimana or somebody like that, where were you when we were fighting and defeating Mengistu? Where were you? The man said, if that is the case, he threw in his towel and resigned. They brought in Ahmad now. They brought in another man. This one, he was a soldier and he's Oromo. And the Tigrayan said, where were you? He said, but I'm in the army. Now they said, no, we are entitled. He said, please, listen to the voices of everybody. They said, no. He said, okay, now, let us face it in the battlefield. As I talk, the party of Zenawi, Ethiopian People's Revolutionary Front something, which had 99% of members of parliament by the time he died, is not there. It is not there. Ahmad dissolved it. Said, this mentality, I am not accepting it. He dissolved it and nobody even raised the finger except the Tigrayans.
Prof, as you sum up, are you predicting the same fate for Uganda?
Well, similar. It cannot be the same because histories are different. But the point I'm making is that the significance of not listening to alternative voices, that is the point I'm making. That we need to listen to alternative voices, not merely dismiss them as Kubejako. And let's not think that some Ugandans are mere biological substances. You can see the case of those who are opposing and participating and trying to participate in politics. They are being departicipated by arresting them, abducting them, arresting them, and torturing them. And the government does not matter. The only few voices from government you hear is they are binding about the image. That I think Kainerugaba is tarnishing the image of the country. They are not bothered about the rights of people who are arrested. They are not bothered about the opposition in parliament. They are saying they are efficient. How do you pass a bill in less than 3 days and you claim you are efficient? Of course you are efficient in manipulating. I saw the Prime Minister's non-verbal expression and verbal expression. She was expressing it that I am efficient. What will you do to me anyway? And you know very well, I have told you before, that I'm the most efficient Prime Minister. I don't know where that statement comes from. President Senghor wrote saying that the tiger does not display its tigritude.
Thank you, Professor, for sharing
So showing this tigritude and keeping off other people has a significance of polarizing the country, and the consequence can be disintegration of the country, which some of us are very, 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 very much concerned about. They are saying that these new people who are putting on red berets are threatening the existence of the state, the integrity of the state. What is threatening the integrity of Uganda are two, in my opinion. One is unequal access to power and unequal access to resources. Unequal access to power and unequal access to resources are the existential threat to the integrity of Uganda.
Very interesting insights from Professor Mwambutsya and Ndebesa. Focus on Parliament now takes a short break. Do stay with us. We'll see you back shortly.
Digital rights are those human rights and legal rights that allow individuals to access, use, create and publish digital media or to access and use computers, other electronic devices and telecommunication networks. Digital rights include a right to freedom of expression, information and communication through technology, a right to privacy and data protection, a right to credit for personal works, a right to universal and equal digital access, a right to identity, a right to anonymity, a right to be forgotten, and a right for protection of minors, among others. The state's digital rights are frequently violated through various unfair actions, for example, blockage of websites and social networks, theft of credentials, unauthorized use of people's data for personal gain, privacy intrusion, online censorship, arrests and intimidation of online users, internet blockages, and the proliferation of laws and regulations that undermine the potential of technology to drive social, economic, and political development worldwide. It is hence every citizen's responsibility to respect rights of other digital users and to speak speak out or report to the responsible parties when one's rights are violated.
Welcome back. In this segment, we continue discussing the hits and the misses in the process of enacting the UPDF Amendment Bill of 2025. Doctor, this draconian legal measure is coming up against the backdrop of a shrinking political and civic space in the country. We now also have instances of cross-border political and civic repression. As we speak today, a Ugandan activist and his Kenyan counterpart were detained in Tanzania, where they had gone to observe the trial of the Tanzanian opposition political figure, Mr. Tindi Lisu. What do you think in terms of implications this legal measure is likely to have on our country's political landscape, especially now given we are looking forward to the forthcoming 2026 general elections?
Yeah, for me, I think really we are living in very telling times, and nobody to me, other than the words of the Palestinian intellectual Edward Said, renowned scholar and academic, retorted towards the time of his dying. He actually reviewed the notion of home, because Edward Said, being Palestinian, just like any other ordinary Palestinians, had been forced out of home. So he had lived roaming the world, and probably in his case, being a respected and revered academic, he had the opportunity to be invited to different countries from time to time. So he lived an academic nomad. He probably traversed almost 25 universities across the world. And he says reflectively that he revisited the notion of home and having homeland. And in our case, maybe we can compare it to our country. And he says he really thinks that he doesn't care much anymore. He said the notion of home apparently is not important. It doesn't make sense. And because after all, both for him who was forced out of home and had been jumping from one place to the next, all he was left with is to long for the day he would go back home. And this didn't seem to happen in his lifetime. So he'd sort of bungled up the idea. But as a paradox, those of us who arguably have home, we have a nation, we have a country, we have Uganda to ourselves. We are lucky not to be refugees, given what is happening around us. But at the same time, we are not enjoying, any privileges or entitlements to people who should be in a home. So the notion of home becomes bogus. It is as well you give it up. So my thinking, and particularly the question you are asking, is the world or the country per se, what we seem to be saying, shrinking civic space, the world becoming much more tumultuous, boils down to just a few individuals. We need to come to the realization that control of aspects in a given homeland, country, or even globally, even by extension globally, because if you look at the influences of people like the World Bank and the IMF, when IMF coughs over 50 countries in Africa here catch a cold. So the same thing, we are found in a situation where, away from the actual tenets of governance, which talk about right to participation, right political participation, right to freedom, right to speech, and all these freedoms. The whole notion has now shrunk to the hands of a few. There are just 1 or 2, 3 people controlling the world. And I think that is particularly in this space of ours of activists, we need to come to reality too. The same scholar that Professor quotes, Fukuyama, other than the notion of governmentality or governments, the idea of government for government, he actually also opines, and I think it's sort of a rejoinder to probably what I think Saint Augustine of Aquinos one time was arguing in the debate of morality. You see, sometimes it is not even the act. You shouldn't wait to get to a bad act, then stop to say, hey, how did this come about? St. Augustine argues that the notion of morality is actually, the premise sits with the mind. Even the thought of a bad act, a bad idea, is bad enough. So this is what we are seeing. You have a few people who have bad ideas, because these ideas of some of the Museveni ideologists, or now we are seeing an ideology rearing its head in Tanzania, whether it was bought from here or bought elsewhere, I do not know. We saw the Gen Zs being shot down in Kenya. We are seeing the disintegration the disintegration of Sudan. Sudan, Khartoum is just it is just a contestation of 2 protagonists, two guys, 2 generals with bad ideas. Ibrahimu on the other side, and then this guy. And the world is not short of these examples. Look at how this guy held hold of Syria for I don't know how many years. He has now been pushed. The people like Russia, Assad, people like Russia who seemed to be backing him up on the hills. Once now that he has been pushed, they have just remained ashore. So the notion of people who carry bad ideas and try to sell it to a majority who actually buy it, like the choir, this parliament, the Ugandan parliament, to me is like a chorus choir. The lead singer just raises a chorus, a verse, and all the best they can do, they are competing on how they are competing to be on the chorus team. That cannot be how life is led. There is no way. So, are we afraid of these notions? Yes. Should they be reversed? Yes. But also, more boldly, buying the idea of Edward Said, I think we need to further problematize this issue, but also expand our horizons. I think what should now begin concerning us more in the world we are going into, and particularly for me now with the advent of the notion of internet and all this and the global world and the global village, I think we need to begin to aspire to want to live, work as global citizens. Because for me, the whole notion of statism as coming off the Vienna conference and all that, I think has come under direct attack. It's at a tipping point, and we need to rethink it. And to just augment this further, as probably I put a rider to it. Something happened in the strive of the black Americans, it was a long strive, and in many phases. There was the question of getting out of the slavery itself. And once they got out of slavery, then there was now the question of being accepted as citizens, which was also a whole huge process. It took a political turn, it took legislation, it took economic reforms, it took education reforms. I want to look at education, because that for me is really the heart of a nation. Because a nation that cannot educate its people, a nation that cannot think, and for me this is where the challenge. For me, this is where the biggest challenge of freedoms are, because human beings in their individual rights will always develop ideas, but they must be counter ideas that are being developed, and there must be space for these ideas, to be put to competition, and then the best ideas taken. But now when you begin to cajole even the space to think, then I think you've touched right the nerve of livelihood or civilization. So if you look at America, for instance, if you look at the black American story, we know there are these two universities. They are considered what they call the Eves League universities in the US. That is Harvard and then University of Columbia. Now, they had their own test of these civilizations at two different times. It started with Harvard. The history of Harvard is that it's a private university, and it has remained more or less so, the catchment, for those who have and their children and all that, and they are preserved. Now, whereas America went through democratization and civilization, they were forced to open up in very tacit ways. When they were doing that, they did not know that they would come to a tipping point, and begin to ask themselves, the decision we took, and this is basically what Professor explained in other terms when he was looking at the question of entitlements. Because the proponents of that notion reach a point, and they begin to sieve, they begin to look over their shoulders, and they begin to ask, for purposes of security of tenure, are these who have come in, are they still part of us? Who is that? Who is the other? But you see, democracy does not work that way. You see? So Harvard started a program because it was poised as a center for academic excellence. Once the other segments of education opened, and they allowed the black children to begin going to primary school, secondary school, and take higher education exams, they woke up to the shock that the black Americans and the Jews were actually picking very high grades. And there would be no reason not to admit them, particularly through an automated system. So they found themselves with children of scholars in Harvard. And then they would ask, but how did this guy come here? Who is this guy? So they were forced at some point to start an interesting program. And that was a program of entrenchment. I don't recall the full titles, but it had to do with something called accelerated talent, athletics. They organized something.
Sort of diverse oriented.
Yes, and you can see this in this bill, because this bill actually talks about veteran welfare, medical welfare, and which are important things, because the Ugandan veteran, right from the Amin soldiers, the Obote soldiers, some have not got.
My father is a veteran.
Has he been paid? Some have never been compensated up to today. Some of our fathers were soldiers. We probably would not be in this languishing class of people which is being laughed at if maybe we had got that inheritance. but because they were never paid, you know. So that happened in Harvard. A similar thing happened in University of Columbia. In University of Columbia, it was again the reverse. In University of Columbia, it happened to be, it was like some kind of, because it is in Colorado, and this is like, it was like some kind of heaven, safe haven. The blacks were moving towards that city to escape mistreatment in the different states, you know, Alaska, Kentucky, and all that. So especially from the southern states, they were moving towards there. The whites there initially welcomed them, then realized, these people are again enjoying exactly what we were denying them. And they started finding means to sort of control them again. So when you see bills like this popping their heads in Uganda today, when you see the push factors of conflict amongst our neighbors, not necessarily hegemonic, but stemming from individual characterization. And the world has suffered people like this. You know, look at dictators like Pol Pot. Look at Stalin. Look at Napoleon. They are individuals who show a character of dangerous people, and they need to be stopped in time. And I think those are the kind of challenges we are having. So our future really is now in our youth. The question for me, what worries me, is the way we have defined growth and success in our societies and how we are being socialized. Because I see youth carrying large placards of some of these gentlemen, pinning them in their houses. They are running after them. They are running after their big chariots. I am not sure whether it's really their ideology they are buying, or they are fascinated by for me, the misguided definition of success and successful people in our societies. And I think for me, that's the real dilemma.
Thank you, Doctor, for your insights. Professor, the opposition has vowed to challenge this piece of legislation in the courts of law. Do you think, in your assessment, this is a correct course of action to take? Because one would suggest that maybe they fight it on the political front, mobilize the public to take direct action against it. Is that true to justified, given the current political context?
We have to go back to the mentality of government. If the mentality of government, that discourse and the mentality still prevails, you can go there and they will even come back again and bring another one, even if the other one is quashed by the courts. Because I think last night the president was commenting on and congratulating what Parliament did, and he was saying, but these judges have enough on their plate. You know, they are sieves of pigs and goats and chicken. You know, the whole notion of judicial review, is it called the judicial review?
Yes.
The role of the judiciary in judicial review of the acts or the bills of Parliament does not arise in the current dispensation. It doesn't. Judges are supposed to run after what thieves?
Chicken thieves.
So they will still pass the draconian laws anyway. But by the way, the viewers and members here, I don't know whether you know the history of draconian law. Draconia was actually a magistrate, a very influential magistrate in Greece. That was the name, Draconia. And he used to pass very harsh laws. Anybody who came, even if you had stolen chicken or a cow, or you had got involved in robbery, you are all subjected to the same punishment, death. until people said, no, this is too much, you know? And that is where the name draconian comes from. They said, no, this draconian man, who was an influential person, is passing very dangerous laws that laws and the punishment that are going to divide this country or negatively impact on the country, and they stopped him and actually banished him. They banished him from Greece. That was one of the punishments they would give to people. So that is the history of draconian law. It comes from a magistrate called Draconia. Now, having said that, I wanted to give caution to us as Ugandans, and remember, all of us are inclusive. I think yesterday there was something circulating on the media to the effect that is it cockroaches or something like that? They passed a law to say that to use insecticides, but when the insecticide was used, it also killed the ants, or the other way around. And when and even those which didn't participate in passing the law, the other insects, I don't know whether they were bees, they also died. We have to be very careful and not simply joke around. We have to be very careful about about managing the state affairs. Because Grace Ibinjira connived with other colleagues in 1964, thereabout. They went and rigged out. They were efficient, like Prime Minister Nabanja is efficient. They were efficient in manipulation of procedures and rigged out Kakonge in the UPC Delegates Conference in Guru. And Kakonge and other radicals said, okay, let's leave you triumphant people. So Ibinjira, together with his colleagues, came from a triumphalism mood. They came with a triumphalism mood. And when they came back at Kampala, they said, what do we do with this opposition ADP who were refusing to convert to UPC? How do we deal with these KY people? Let us pass a law. So Ibinjira was, at that time, Grace Ibinjira was the Minister of Justice. So he pushed hurriedly, efficiently, if you want, efficiently, manipulated, and passed a law through Parliament of detention without trial. He was triumphant after defeating Kakonge on non-principled issues. Actually, Kakonge was standing on principled issues. Ibinjira was on non-principled issues. But the powers that be at that time, they wanted Ibinjira to push that law, that draconian law, in Parliament, detention without trial, targeting DP. These stubborn Byanyimas and the Chiwanukas who were outside Chiwanuka was like Chagulanyi, and Byanyima was in Parliament. He was like, I don't know who, because the leader of opposition had already been, had already converted to UPC. So, triumphantly, efficiently manipulated, they passed the detention without trial, targeting opposition. Okay. The first victim was Ibinjira, and the 5 triumphalist ministers, the 5 ministers of Ngobi, Chirya, Magezi, Rumu, these were conservatives. Those who were opposed to Kakonge. These were the conservative people who triumphed in Guru, and they were put in a bus and detained in Karamoja. They remained there until Idi Amin rescued them. If Idi Amin had not rescued them, you know, they were going to rot in Karamoja until the cattle rustlers finished them from there. So let's be very careful about behaving like the draconian of the old of Greece, and think that in our triumphant mood, the other Ugandans don't matter. No, other Ugandans also matter. Let us listen to them, even if we don't agree with them. And after all, they had the numbers in Parliament, they would possibly have passed. But the manner in which the law was hurriedly passed through was an attitude of, what will they do? I don't care. After all, you have the guns. But Ibinjira at that time, he knew he had the guns. But when he was bundled in a lorry, not even a drone, he was bundled in a lorry like cattle and taken to Karamoja, because he had felt triumphant after defeating Kakonge in Guru illegally, by the way, because that election, I'm told, within UPC was rigged. They sent a helicopter in Kampala to print some cards to give them to non-UPC members, even to go and vote and rig Kakonge and then feel triumphant. So you can see people in the parliament feeling triumphant. Now, what is the significance of that? What is the significance of that to the body politic in Uganda? There are people who are going to be suppressed, removed from parliament. You can see it was accompanied by this other bill also to deny opposition some money to use to organize. I imagine the NRM will remain with its vote, with its budget being paid.
Or more.
Or even being given more. So they will triumph. But this is temporary. Why do I say temporary? You see, we need to move this country. This is a pluralist country, a multi-ethnic country. When you are pushing NUP only to remain in Buganda, you are riding on a dangerous tiger. Because Buganda alone can be a challenge to you who are laughing, who are jubilating, who are triumphant. You push UPC to Langu. Langu alone can cause you a problem. You see? So, therefore, this manipulation and triumphalism and feeling good because you are a manipulator, because you are efficient, is not building a nation. I am concerned about nationhood. I'm concerned about nationhood because we are increasingly passing draconian wars like the draconia of the ancient Greece. But at least the Greeks reached a certain point and said, Draconia, hold on. You are taking the country to precipice. We are about to fall. No. They arrested him and banished him. They realized that, no, we are not going in the right path. Let us listen to the other voices in Uganda. Let us listen to the opposition, not to look at opposition as merely biological substances. This opposition is representing certain constituencies. There are people who are quiet because they don't want to exercise their, what we call, agency. You know, we have two forms of agency among individuals and the community. There are those people who exercise their agency by navigating their lives in what is existing. As long as I can survive, I can earn some money here, I can do this and survive, let those people be gagged. Let the opposition voices be curtailed. Let the organization of the dissenting voices be curtailed. Me, I will see how to gain something out of the existing situation. That is called agency also. But there are those whose agency, they say, no, mine is to change the conditions, not merely surviving the conditions. So most of those youth, doctor, you are talking about, have decided to exercise their agency by surviving. They are now putting ahead survival instincts, not reasoning, not saying that, you know, critically, where is this taking us and our children and our grandchildren? Like the Greeks said, Draconia, you might pass those laws to arrest chicken thieves and other people who are disturbing us right now, but what about the fate of our great-grandchildren? And they said, Draconia, banished. Let's reverse the draconian laws. Similarly, I will call upon citizens of Uganda, whether movement, opposition, dissenting views, please, let's not pass draconian laws, feel triumphant that we are efficient in passing a law in one day instead of involving others. I would have wanted to participate. I have participated before in these laws. The Law Society would have wanted to participate. The opposition parties were expected to participate because it was affecting them directly. But all these were defeated by the correct line. See, there are those who think they have a correct line, they have maje, they have the money, and therefore they have their way. Regardless of the sentiments and the feelings of other fellow citizens. This is what Ibinjira and company felt triumphalist. They came thumping their chest. You know that term called thumping chest? They came thumping their chest when they were coming from Guru into Kampala and started passing draconian laws of detention without trial. So now, this law, this bill, which is going to become into law, is targeting dissenting views, dissenting organizing, dissenting whatever. Can I give a history quickly?
Briefly.
This history is like this. As you all know, the question is not about national integrity and security as is presented. And that's why people involved in those guns and whatever are supposed to appear before the military tribunal. The suspects in the Kagezi case, they used the gun. They killed a great prosecutor. They are being tried in civilian courts. They used the arms. You have Jamiri Mukuru and the company who have been involved in using guns and even bombs. They are being tried in a civilian court.
For terrorism.
For terrorism. I think even those who are suspected to have got involved in the Katumba Wamara issue are being tried in civilian court. That is the history. But the moment you appear to be opposed, you had General Sejusa military court. I think BSJ military court. The Noop Beret boys military court. You can see that those who are aligned to the military courts are political opposition. The other ones who are supposed to threaten the existence of the nation are in civilian courts. So the aim is to gag the voices of the opposition. They have put in this law, the new law, that there is a provision for appealing. And therefore, take heart, there is appealing. But when will you appeal? These are lawyers, you are lawyers. You know you appeal after the case has been decided. But they will take you to a military court martial. First of all, the process of arresting you is going to be military. They have militarized the justice system. You will be arrested by the military. You will be detained in a military facility. And you know what that means to be detained in a military facility. You cannot even access your lawyers. And you will be arraigned to a military court. And the trial will never end. The Noop boys have been there for almost 5 years now. I think 5 years now. The trial has never started for even some people. It has never started, isn't it? So when will you ever appeal? You cannot appeal where the trial has been deliberately delayed. And therefore, that will not serve justice to the people. Now, you appear triumphant that you are gagging people. It appears it is a technique to survive, consolidate, and move ahead, but it is dangerous. It is dangerous because, first of all, those people incarcerated have their relatives. They have got their supporters. They have got their constituencies. Now, these constituencies might appear to suppress their anger But the rage that you suppress, it is like a pressure cooker. Once it gets the time to get out, it is going to spill out that fume that will not affect those ones. They will affect by Narumanya and Serumanya. Is that what they say in Uganda? My Uganda, Narumanya, my Uganda is still in nursery, but I get the concepts. So what I'm saying, we need to be sober. We need to be sober and practice politics of divergent management, managing diversity. We are a diverse country. You are not going to force people into one bucket and they stay there. No. People will want to have their politics, their expression here and there. And then let's be sensitive. Let's not be insensitive to the people's demands, because Ibinjira was insensitive, and you know what happened to Uganda. Obote was insensitive, you know what happened to Uganda. Idi Amin was insensitive, you know what happened to Uganda. So please, the politics of today should not be insensitive. We should avoid draconian laws, because those draconian laws are not only controlling, you know, the triumphalism that you see is like, I don't know, those people who think they are they have triumphed and they bask in that triumphalism, are not looking at things from a long perspective angle. Because we need to create a situation where we manage our differences, but now we are mismanaging our differences. You see, arresting the 5 ministers by Obote was a failure to manage differences. The storming of Ruviri and exiling of the Kabaka was failure to manage differences. Idi Amin banning politics in Uganda was failure to manage differences. The failure to have the right elections in 1980 was failure to manage differences. So we should legislate in such a manner that we promote, yes, human rights, but as far as I'm concerned, myself, Ndebesa, we should legislate in such a manner that we are managing differences. Mismanaging diversity is recipe for this country to disintegrate. There are those who say Uganda is not a failed state, which is true, but why? I attribute it to the presence of Museveni, who has got royalty of the army. Now, Museveni is a mortal being. So when President Museveni is not around, are people looking at the lives of their sons and their daughters and their offsprings and their grandsons and whatever? Are people looking beyond? Because people say, I will mention this one, Mr. Coordinator, moderator, as I finish, that I have heard very many people say this thing. Not among them was Kahindo Tafire, whom I saw in Parliament yesterday, and concerned. Because it seems he was not concerned was what was going on. He had just come to vote. That you see, Uganda has been there. You found Uganda here. It has been there and it will be there. Come on. It may disintegrate. There was a country called Soviet Union. It disintegrated now. Is there a Soviet Union? Many countries now, they are fighting for one of their provinces, which is Ukraine. 11 countries. There was a country called Czechoslovakia. It is now very many countries. It is also, there was a country called Yugoslavia with Marshal Tito. He was a field marshal. He was not even a general. Tito was a field marshal. And he put together a country after the Second World War for about 30 years also. When he died, Yugoslavia is now 6 countries. It disappeared. Now, there was a man called Gaddafi. He held Libya together for 40 years. Today, there is almost no country called Libya. There is a man called Bashir. He held Sudan together for 30 years. Today, there is no Sudan. There was a man called Siad Barre. In Somalia, he held the country, I think, for 20 years together. Today, there is no Somalia. There was a man called Marshal Mobutu. He headed the country together for 30 years. Today, there is no Congo. Can't we learn some lessons? The challenge is that we study history, but we don't learn from history and respect citizens, fellow citizens, as human beings and not merely biological substances.
Thank you, Professor, for those interesting viewpoints. I must appreciate you, my panelists, Dr. Tolit and Professor Mwambutsya Ndebesa, for your able participation on today's edition of Focus on Parliament. Many thanks to our esteemed viewers for your time and for watching. Much appreciation to the production department for keeping us live on air. Please, our dear viewers, do engage us on our various social media platforms. We are on X, we are on Facebook, we are on YouTube, where you can watch this program and also subscribe to our channel. We'll see you next time. Be blessed.